Hey everybody, super happy you all made it here. So my name is Philomena and as I've been announced, going to tell you a little bit about the things that we did in the last year in our indie studio and why I think we are still here. So we're really starting at the very beginning when we were just a tiny little font that had just started the company and how the years went by super quick and we have turned into the 15 people team that we are today. So we're starting the story at the very beginning with the very first game that we made. So far we've made 4 games. This is Niche, a genetic survival game, then Nimbatus, the space drone constructor, the Wandering Village, and Dungeon Crawler. And they're very, very different from each other, and you're going to hear why. So within this talk, you're always going to see these little D points at the edge, and these are the decision points, where I think these are the points that were important for us, where we really made a decision that influenced us in the long run. And at the end of the talk, we're going to have quite a lot of time and have an overview of all the decision points, and then we can talk about whatever you thought was most interesting, or challenge for you, if you think there is a decision point I really didn't see was an important decision point that we made, bring it up in the end, and I'm happy to talk about that as well. So the story started with the first game, which is Niche, a genetic survival game. It was originally a game that I made back in university as my bachelor project. I wanted to make a game that is inspired by population genetics. And so within 3 months, I made this little prototype as my final thesis for school. And I really, really loved it. It was kind of like this chess setting, turn-based strategy game, but with genetics, with realistic genetics. And it kind of combined all my passions in life. I wanted to do art, programming, writing, telling stories, with emergent storytelling, and then also my love for biology. And I felt like this is really the game. If I do anything with my life, I'm going to make this game. I don't care if anybody likes it, I'm going to make this game. And luckily, I wasn't the only one that thought so, because very quickly I found a few people that joined me in this endeavor. And we started out as a hobby project studio, kind of 4 people in a tiny, tiny room, working on evenings, and on Friday we all met. And from the very beginning, we wanted to keep it fair to everybody, because at this point we had no money whatsoever. It was a hobby project. And so we all decided we would just write down our hours. And at the end, if there was any rev share to be split, we would split it depending on how much time you put into the project. While we were happily working away at the game, I was at the same time starting my master and decided to write my master thesis about community building for indie game developers, essentially where to find people, where to bring them, how to keep them engaged, and then how to actually get them to help you in your endeavor to make the game. So I spent a whole year trying to find out how can I get people from this stage where they have never heard of your game, down the funnel, up until they are your player, they bought your game, and maybe even your fan that loves your game and studio a lot. And so part of this whole process was going to events, as you're doing right now. There's a bunch of people out there showcasing their game, finding their very first fans to engage with later. I put a lot of emphasis also on being able to reconnect with these people, gathering their email addresses, and back in the day, bringing them to a Facebook group. Nowadays, it's the Discord equivalent, right? Bringing them to one place and just giving them the game for free. At the very beginning, I even made a version that was playable in the web browser to make it just as little friction as possible. You could just one click in Facebook and you were in the game for free and you could play it, and everybody was writing feedback and the group was growing and growing. And then my teachers and me had a little bit of a disagreement whether or not all of this stuff would actually help me with making the game, releasing the game, and getting money for the game especially. And so the deal was that I would try and see if I can do a crowdfunding campaign for the game. And to their surprise, but also to my surprise, that worked out quite well. So we managed to raise also, especially from the people that we had gathered previously over the few months when we were at events, managed to raise $75,000, which for us back at the day was the world. And it was also interesting to see that we had a lot of professors and teachers and so on actually supporting us on the platform. They probably will never play the game, but they thought it was cool that somebody is making a game that is like inspired by genetics. At that point, more people started to see the game and started to become interested. And that was the point where we started to get quite a few offers, like, hey, you know, we want to publish you, we want to this and that with you, we want to invest in your company, which all was very tempting because even though we had gotten a little bit of money from Kickstarter, it was far from being able to really pay salaries for 4 people. We're in Zurich, which is one of the most expensive cities. Don't start an indie studio in Zurich. But yeah, so we had these offers, but at the same time I thought like, no, but we already now have like this community and we have a team that is really interested in seeing how far we can take it ourselves. So it was kind of hard to say no to all these things while living off ramen, essentially. And then as time went on, we kept working on the game after the Kickstarter for about a year. And then we launched it into early access on Steam back in 2016. Early access for us was great because at the time the game was really very, very small. You maybe had like half an hour or an hour playtime max. I'm not sure if I would still dare to do this today because people are getting more and more demanding of what an early access game actually is. But these were the nice days, you know, where the game went to the green light process and people were still a little bit more forgiving. This was also the time when we actually started the studio, because up until the release of the game, we were just doing it as a loose collective of friends, writing down our hours, and we had like a contract with each other. What happens if somebody wants to get out of the team? I really, really, really recommend you do that, because sometimes things can happen that you really didn't expect, and we really ended up depending on having this contract and how to go forward with the team. So it was very easy to just work in this format, but it was good to have something that we could rely on in case something happened. And so now was the time where for the first time we were actually, because of the early access release, which was going quite good, we had some money and we needed to pay taxes, so we needed to take it a step more in the legal direction of actually having a company being able to employ everybody. And so when we started the studio, we basically set out to do this. We wanted to build a place where we enjoy creating games that we love and we can make a living. But it was really important for us that the first 2 points, enjoy creating games and games that we love, would really always stay in the focus, because as soon as you start getting some money, it can become very tempting to just start focusing on the money and forgetting why you're even doing this, and like focusing on the games that you really want to make. So from there, the team grew a little bit, and we also kept working on the game. Like, we made a lot of updates. We had a forum, which was, even at the time, was very outdated, but I was like, no, forums are really cool. And for this game, it was really very nice. We had like a voting system, and the forum grew quite fast. So this was our main focus point. And as we kept working the game, this is what it looked like when it was finished. So you can see here also like the whole genetics situation going on. And then we brought it to 1.0 about 1 year later. This was when we were still fast. You're going to see that the speed at which we're making games is going to... And then we tried to fix that at the end of the presentation, but you will see. And what really, really touched me is that the full launch went so much better than the early access launch. I don't know if who of you has done an early access and the full launch, but usually either early access is higher or they are like about the same. And this was really just all the people, all the community people that we gathered, and then we told them like, please tell your favorite streamer, please tell your favorite YouTuber, write a review, tell it to a friend, and they are what made this difference. After that, we decided to also look into expanding to consoles, because PC version had done quite well, and we decided, since we're still a very small team, we should go ahead and outsource. And yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag. the end result, porting to consoles, was really good. The game ended up selling about 350,000 copies, but we had some communication problems with the outsourcing. They had a different pacing. They were much faster than us, and they were like constantly telling us, like, oh, you have to give us feedback now, and it turned into a bit of a stressful situation for us. So we were like, consoles, yes, outsourcing, maybe. And then we also made a little excursion into mobile, where we made a version of the game that was still like focused on the genetics, but more focused on like a casual gameplay loop with puzzles. And it absolutely flopped, unfortunately. It was a premium game. We were like, we're just going to use the same techniques that we do on PC now for mobile. It was also just done by like me part-time and 2 interns, so it was a little bit of an experimental project. But we were like, okay, maybe not mobile. And so now, with the game being done, we really took a step back. We had now started the studio, and we made some decisions on how we wanted to go forward now with the second game. We really wanted to keep the same salary kind of level, that we wanted to keep it fair, but we decided to get rid of the hours-based share thing, because we had seen some things like, people really tried to work as much as they could to like increase their share, and we were like, let's just keep it, like everybody gets 5K a month. In Switzerland, that is what you need to survive. No more hour-based shares. But the bonus will be split. If we have money to do a bonus, it will be split equally among everybody, depending on how many years they're already there. And the deal was that if you're in the company 3 years, you get the same as the founders. And this is still the same rule today. Then we also decided we really want to keep the hierarchy flat. It is really fun to work with people that you know. And also, like when we brought in new people, it was usually friends or friends of friends, or people that we had already maybe done a game jam with or something, just in order to minimize the drama risk. Because with so few people, even one person that doesn't fit in or like has a problematic character can really cause you a lot of trouble. So for us, this was a good decision, which has resulted in minimal drama over the last years. And we also introduced an end of the year voting thing. So every end of the year, we would all sit down together, and then everybody could say what they wanted us to do as a studio in the next 2 years, and then we would like vote on it. And then it was the job, essentially, of me and my co-founder to try and get as many of these done as possible. Speaking of my co-founder, we then started on the second game, which was originally his hobby project. So we met at a local game pitch event, and I was showing my genetics game, and he was showing his drone game. And then from the start, it had been decided that he would help with the genetics game, and then we would help him finish his game, and it became the second game of the studio. And it's an action roguelike, so you kind of build drones out of these different parts, and then you send them on missions. And this was quite a challenge, because as you can see, the genre is very different to the first game, and the target audience is also very different. So with the first game, we also had a lot of girls, like teenage girls. I would say like 60% of our players were like teenage girls, and they weren't really fond of the drone combat game. So we kind of had to start community building from scratch again, but like applying similar methods that we had used with the first game. From a business perspective, was this the smartest move? Maybe not. Maybe it would have been smarter to just do like a follow-up project on the first one, but that was the given situation of the studio. Here again, for some reason, it ended up raising pretty much exactly the same amount on crowdfunding, even though it was a completely different crowd. And here again, once the Kickstarter was done, the people started coming out of their holes, like starting to want to make you offers. That seems to be a pattern. So whenever you start proving this is actually something, people are starting to approach you. But again, we said we would not. Then we did, once again, early access, and then the full launch was 2 years later. You can see we already got 1 year slower, and this is going to continue. Unfortunately, we couldn't really port the game to consoles because the controls were not really made for controllers, so we couldn't make it playable on controller at all. And so, but still, on Steam alone, the game ended up selling up over 200,000 copies, which made it profitable. And I really think that we were, with these first 2 games, we were very lucky that they both ended up selling well. I think the community approach helped a lot, and they also, so for this game, we had a lot of like viral GIFs on Reddit and on Imgur back in the day, so that really helped. But it was really a bit of a lucky shot that the first 2 worked. Grew the company a little bit from that. And one thing that we did from the start, and that I think is really important that we have kept until this day, is to really celebrate whenever you do a win. Like, it can be your demo is finished, your vertical slice is finished, the game has been released, or the game has done well, or whatever. Grab your team. I don't care if it's a fancy restaurant or a picnic or something, or just do like a fun little team activity where you all celebrate what you have achieved together. I think this has been a really, really important part of keeping us together over the years. We also always had a big focus on trying to giving back. So since we were doing well at this time, we decided we would found a co-working space in Zurich, in Switzerland, together with 2 other studios. Unfortunately, that was 3 months before COVID. Not the best time to give back to the industry with a co-working space. But it survived, and after COVID, it started to fill up, and more game developers were moving in there. So that has been like a fun side gig that was going on. And now, since we had completed the first 2 games, where it had already been previously defined what kind of game it would need to be, right? We couldn't really look into doing any market research because, yeah, this is my game, this is my co-founder's game, we have to make them both. So this was the first time where we could actually take a big step back and look at what kind of games we could do, and also take a step back and think about what we actually did with the first 2 games. Because you saw there was a clear, for both games, they followed a clear validation process. So at the beginning, there was the idea that convinced a team that they should work on it. This is a step that you see often, right? And then they both did well in their respective niche on social media. So for Nimbatus, it was very much like Reddit and Imgur, and Niche did very good like in Facebook groups related to genetics. So they took that step. And then they both did Kickstarter. I've seen quite a few games that are doing really well on socials, but then in the end, when they come out, nobody buys them. And I think it's something completely different to make something go viral on social media and having people that actually want to play it, because maybe the graphics just look cool, but I don't want to play it. So for us, Kickstarter has been an important validation step, because there people are actually buying the game from you early, right? And then a minimal viable product on early access. Really, the smaller, the better. The smaller you can make the game and launch it, the better. And then the game needed to finance itself while in early access. So the rule is, in general, at our studio, as long as it finances itself and is fun to work on, it can stay in early access indefinitely. And so we really took a step back and thought about, okay, what kind of game do we want to make next? And ideally, it should be a game that is also easy to market. And ideally, it should also be a game that would bring in both communities from the 2 previous games. And so we kind of ended on this. Also because at the time it looked like city builders are having a little bit of a revival, and we really all liked to play city builders, so we ended up picking a concept for a game where you build a city on the back of a giant wandering creature, because we kind of wanted to bring in like a twist into the genre, and also because I got to be the project lead and I really like biology, so if you give it to me, it's just going to be a biology game. So we decided to once again try our validation circle, as I call it. I also call it the validate, hype, release loop. I did a whole talk about this specifically in more detail, which you can watch on YouTube. It's just called validate, hype, release. So after settling on the idea, the next step would have been social tests. So we went ahead and we did some posts on Facebook, on Twitter, and so on, and just saw if people like this concept and this idea. And they really did. Like, my measly little tiny Facebook account, I asked like, hey, what should we name the game? And a lot of people were like into the concept and starting making suggestions. It had some viral, like the super early placeholder art, had some viral tweets, and we were like, okay, social passed. And then, once again, we decided to take it to Kickstarter, and maybe interesting here, so this is the Kickstarter trailer back from, oh, what was it, 2020, so a long time ago. And the game actually ends up, like, looks very similar to this. But back in the day, this trailer was actually just, it is made in Unity, but it is just assets being placed, animations being placed. This is not the actual game being played. And because we thought this game really depends heavily on the visuals, so we made 2 separate prototypes, a visual prototype and gameplay prototypes, actually multiple gameplay prototypes. And we always made the gameplay prototypes to confirm, okay, what we're promising in the visuals is possible, but the visuals were something completely different, and the visuals for a long time were way ahead of the gameplay prototype that we worked on. But we always knew, like, okay, we can make it work. So we made this trailer for the Kickstarter. It was also the first time we had a Kickstarter that did not have a demo, which was very scary for us, because the 2 previous ones, you could just try out the game. And here it was really just a trailer. But still, our plans seemed to work out. We could motivate both communities from the previous game, and the trailer in itself was enough to convince quite a few people to actually back us, which was amazing. Maybe also because at this point, we had a bit of a track record to deliver what we promised with the 2 previous campaigns. I wrote a super detailed article about the Kickstarter and what we ended up spending on, like, ads for the Kickstarter and so on, if you want to read it there. At the same time, this was the gameplay prototype. So yeah, it was then quite a lot of work to, like, fuse them together again at the end. So it was some extra work, but it helped us to, like, build up a lot of hype around the game very early in development. The sums were getting more tempting from publishers, and it was getting harder and harder to say no, especially because our resources going into this game already, like, being a year and a half into production, was really eating into everything that we had saved up from the 2 previous games. The game was supposed to come out a whole year earlier, but then it was kind of starting to get too much attention to come out as a tiny little version. I'm going to get to that in a second, but it was getting harder. The sums were getting higher, and our bowls were getting more empty, so it was getting harder and harder to say no. Also, we had another problem, because there was a really, really great game designer that we wanted to hire, but he wanted a higher salary than we could offer, so we could not hire him because we had a same salary policy. So sometimes your decision comes to bite you in the butt. So the game gained more and more traction. In the end, it reached over 500,000 wish lists, and we kept on delaying the launch because we were like, oh God, there's too many eyeballs already on this game. We need to make it as good as we can. Otherwise, you know, we're just going to lose all this initial push that we could have. And oh, actually, we need to localize it to Chinese, because back with the 2 previous games, it was only, like, very small early access releases and English only. And here we felt like, no, we have to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And so the launch ended up then being in 2022. And up until, again, in early access. And up until this point, the game had been in production for 1.5, even closer to almost 2 years, and had been, like, about 1.5 million in development cost, which was all of our money, and we were broke. We really had nothing left, but we had these 500,000 wish lists, so should be okay, right? You never know. We also did a lot of beta testing and alpha and beta testing with our backers, but also with, like, people from the Steam Next Fest. They could sign up for the newsletter, and then they would get an email and they would get access to an alpha test, which helped us at the high point of the newsletter get to over 100,000 people in the newsletter, because of these mechanics that people sign up for the newsletter and they get into the alpha. We cleaned it out now, so we're back down at like 40, but like, yeah, a lot of people came in into the community through that. Yeah, we were broke. Luckily, the game did well. It sold 100,000 copies in the first week. And then we also ended up signing a Game Pass deal for it, which was really good for us. And here, expanding to consoles before with the previous game really helped because they saw that, okay, you're actually capable of making a fun game on Xbox. But this time we didn't outsource it. We actually hired one programmer, and she had to learn how to port to Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch, and she had never previously done it before, all by herself, but she did really good. And we felt like this was more did fit better like with our pacing at the studio, and it's now knowledge that we're keeping for the next game. So far, the game has sold around 450,000 copies, thanks to Game Pass, was played by 2 million people, and still has 900,000 outstanding wish lists, which I'm hoping will be converting at the 1.0 release, which is going to be in July. And here you can see we started this game in 2020 and it's done in 2025. So we went from spending 2 years on a game to 3 years to 5 years with more people. And I'm like, I mean, I guess the games got bigger and bigger too, but I didn't like the tendency where this is going. Still, very good result. This brought us to our current team size, and we could give a raise to everybody so that we could finally hire that one guy that we could not hire before. Yes. Yeah, that was very cool. But as you could feel from me talking distressed, the Wandering Village has been a bit of a financial burden on the studio. And we have this whole end of the year voting, right, where people can say how they want to do things, what they want to do. And one thing that has been coming up all the time in the last 3-4 years was, please let us make smaller games. Like, I don't know if you know it, but the beginning of a project is always the most fun, and then once you're like deep in production and polishing, it gets a little bit less exciting. So the team was like, please let us make some smaller games. And we were like, okay, we'll try that, I guess. In order to also celebrate how well the Wandering Village release went and how big of a relief it was for us, and to encourage people to make smaller games, we introduced Do What You Want afternoons. So every Monday and Friday afternoon, you do whatever you want. I write weird books about centaurs. My coworker makes costumes, or you just go to the gym. But this is a bunch of game developers, so of course, what are they going to do on these afternoons? They make a bunch of prototypes, which is now like become a thing. Every month there's like 2 or 3 new prototypes coming out, and we always like look at them and evaluate them on what would make sense to actually turn into a game. And then also part of the whole, oh God, thank God, Wandering Village went well celebration thing. We went to Japan with everybody for 2 weeks to celebrate. And then my co-founder, Micha, our lead programmer, and Larissa, and actually the whole team, got super addicted to the arcades and the claw machines in the arcades, and we spent way too much time there. And then we were like, wait a minute. One of the prototypes we made in the Do What You Want afternoons is actually a claw machine game. And like, maybe it would be really popular in Japan, because there's not really yet, like, and roguelike deck builders were super popular at the time. Peglin was super popular at the time. And like, physics-based roguelike deck builders are popular, and maybe it would be super popular in Japan. So they ended up actually turning it into a game, which is a claw machine roguelike deck builder, where your deck is in the claw machine, and you have to draw it out, and then you're fighting little opponents. And we have named it Dungeon Crawler. And yeah, that would have never happened if we hadn't taken this little trip. It would have been disappeared in the freezer, and we would have not continued to work on it. So yeah, we made a smaller game. But you can see here again, yet another genre, yet again, a completely different genre. So at this point, we made a turn-based strategy game, an action roguelike, a city builder, and a roguelike deck builder. It's like, okay. But okay, let's see. We have this demo for this game now. So we took it to the Steam Deck Builders Fest and made a push, like on YouTube and Twitch, for people that played similar games and also people that played our previous games. And that actually worked pretty well. So just the game reveal itself. We also hired a Japanese PR agency because we think the game is going to be popular in Japan. And that was absolutely true. We had some pretty big, especially Japanese influencers play it. It also did fairly good in the Next Fest, where we did another demo update and another influencer push, and then just some smaller events in between, some showcases for which we made some trailers. Also, forgot to say that, for the Wandering Village, we participated in a lot of showcases, like something like PC Gaming Show, and it took so much time away from the development, where we had to make all these fancy new trailers showing off new features. So that was something that really ate into the development time, but in the end turned out to be worth. And then we wanted to go release it once again on early access, but then there was this studio that is working right next to us in the co-working space, and we're like, wait, actually we should make a mobile version of this. And we were like, we did that before and it really, really didn't work. And they were like, please, I think. And also we did outsourcing before, and that also wasn't too great, but they were like, please, you can, if we suck, you can just walk over and slap us in the face, essentially. And we're like, fair enough. So let's see if we can make it work. So for the first time ever, we sim shipped early access on something else than just PC, which was the App Store and the Google Play Store. And the game ended up selling 350,000 copies in the last 6 months, still like 200,000-ish outstanding wish lists. Japan is in the top 3 countries, so they really like their claw machines. And 40% of the copies are actually on mobile, which I never would have thought would be possible. It's a premium mobile game, but like Ateo, our porting company, did such a good job. It has a 4.9 star rating on iOS and Android. And it's now also in the Google Play Pass, which is also great to bring in additional revenue for premium games. And I guess I was proven wrong that mobile doesn't work and that outsourcing doesn't work. So I guess the learning here is just that just because something doesn't work the first time around, just try it again, maybe it works, I guess. And this was really, that all of this happened was really also thanks to the co-working space, because Ateo, the company, was actually a co-founder of the little co-working space, and a lot of collaborations started to come out of it. We also are like hosting regular events where people are like presenting themselves or their projects, so we can start forming new teams, or like there is a new publisher that came out of the co-working space and is now signing a bunch of games in the co-working space. Or you are a dev and you need a job and you start working part-time at another studio in the co-working space while making your own things. And also it really, really helped in convincing politicians that games are actually important. Yes, we are still fighting the battle. You are probably as well. In Switzerland, it's still like, oh, games are violent and they just make our kids addicted. So we have to fight hard to actually show them. So we sometimes like invite politicians and then they wear VR goggles for the first time. And they're like, wow. And all of that really helped to get us into a position where we applied for a huge ass hall that had just like emptied out. And you could apply if you're like a cultural association. And we really ended up getting it, which is amazing. We moved in early this year, and it's 2,500 square meters of game development. So if you're ever in Zurich and you don't know where to go, just come there. We do lots of events, we do talks, and yes, I think that has been a really nice development in the last year in Zurich. So, talked about this problem, right? Completely different genres, completely different target audiences. It bothers me. In a way, it's very nice because we could see that we're capable, that we can make games in different genres. And even if one genre goes out of fashion, we can adapt and make a game in another genre. So that's really cool. But I also feel like we left a lot of potential on the table, because now where are all the Wandering Village fans going? Are they going to play Dungeon Crawler? Maybe. Probably not all of them. That is why I finally convinced my business partner that we should start a publishing branch 2 years ago, which essentially focus on take a game that we have successfully marketed, find games that are fairly similar, that have a similar target audience. So now we can tell all the Wandering Village fans to go play Airborne Empire or Terrascape or Flotsam next. And that has been really a decision because we wanted to diversify our risk because, as you saw, remember the heavy burden Wandering Village thing. So that I'm hoping that never again I will be in the situation where I'm sitting there like, the game is coming out tomorrow and everything is done if it gets bad reviews or something. And ideally I'm always saying I'm trying to get as many legs for the studio as Ombu, which is many. So for us, the publishing branch was really one such thing that we wanted to do. And also the same with like making smaller games. So Dungeon Crawler really proved us that yes, apparently we can make smaller games. Even though the Wandering Village has of course made, like because the game is way more expensive, Dungeon Crawler is 10 on Steam and 5 on mobile, and the Wandering Village is 25. So of course the Wandering Village has made quite a bit more money. But in terms of return of investment, this is 1.5 people 1 year, and Wandering Village was 10 people for almost 5 years. So Dungeon Crawler has been, I would say, 3 times stronger in terms of return on investment. Yes, and since it has done well, now we're probably also moving the publisher in a direction that we're going to sign 2 or 3 roguelike games. So if you're making either something city builder-ish or something roguelike deck builder-ish, please talk to me, because my team will never learn. The next game they're making is a simulation visual novel. Yes, but even though sometimes I wonder, I lay in bed in night and I think if we're making the right decisions, but I think if you really see it in the context of trying to build a place where you can enjoy creating games that you love and that you can make a living, it has been the right decisions for us. Thank you very much. So this is the decision board with all the collected decisions.
Thank you so much for sharing your fantastic story. Are there any questions?
Yeah, so you chose to deny most of all of the publisher/investor opportunities.
Yes.
I wonder, what's the real reason why you choose to say no to all of them?
Why? Okay, so the very, very first game I made was a mobile game that we had a publisher for, and I worked my ass off, like while I was still a student, and then it absolutely terribly flopped with the publisher support, and then I was like, next time I would rather fail and know it's all been my fault instead of having somebody else. And that's why we really wanted to do the first game by ourselves and try. And then since it worked with the first one, we were kind of like, let's see if we can take it further. Also, we really just had people in the team that wanted to learn about the whole publishing and marketing thing. If you don't have these people in your team, I absolutely understand. I mean, I'm now also a publisher. Who am I to say? But I really think that if you have the people that are motivated in your team, go for it. If you have the time, do it. If you don't want to have anything to do with marketing, please get somebody else to do it, because somebody should do it.
All right.
First of all, thank you. I want to say it was very insightful. Also loving the end slide here. I'm going to be a little advocate of the devil. I don't know if we say that in English, but just translating here. So let's say you kind of made a gamble on the 5 years and going broke, minus 20K, because you knew you had a lot of wish list.
Yeah.
It's been shown before that wish lists don't always transfer to the desired sales. Is there any takeaways that you would change if you were in that situation again, now that you have the experience, because you were kind of going all in?
Yeah, it was a bit of a bad situation because we were supposed to sign also some things for the game, like some platform deals and so, way earlier. And we were kind of waiting on that. And that gave us, then we thought, oh, we're going to be fine, we're going to sign them before. And then we ended up signing them after. Yeah, I'm not sure. Probably, maybe we should have just stuck with the plan to release it in a smaller version and not have taken that extra year to polish it out. That would have definitely been the more risk-averse approach, because I think it would have still done well. And then maybe we could have just had a bigger 1.0 release. But we felt like this was the opportunity of our lifetime. So in the end, I'm not sure what would have been the better approach, but it was very stressful. So even though it sounds all good, right? But it was a very stressful half year. So maybe in retrospect, just put it out earlier. It has no Chinese local, and we're going to see where it goes from there.
There was someone over here.
So first of all, thank you for presentation. It was amazing. I had a question. At the beginning of your path, you mentioned that your team basically were a group of friends.
Yeah.
But you did say that it's good to have a contract.
Yes.
In case someone wants to leave.
Yes.
So can you maybe expand on this contract? Like, is it an actual legal agreement that imposes some obligations on your friends, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's mostly just an agreement that what happens if, somebody wants to get out, or what happens if you all want somebody to get out, because even if it's your friends, things can go wrong, and you kind of want to have a way to make sure you can keep working on the game, even if then one person on the team doesn't want it to continue, or wants to start be in your way. We really had the situation where nobody expected it. We had a big fight in the group, and we needed to get one person out of the team in order for the game to make it and to really be finished. So I just really advise there's a lot of, in German it's a Gesellschaftsvertrag. I'm not sure what the English equivalent is, but just look online for if you're working in a group kind of agreements. There's a lot of templates that you can use, and I recommend you do.
Thank you.
Okay. I wanted to ask if you could go a bit more into detail about how you were building the hype around your games, because you mentioned Facebook groups and Reddit, and I was wondering about that, especially now with more social medias like TikTok and everything.
It really, really depends on the game. So, for example, Dungeon Crawler is doing terrible on social media. So this one would have not passed the social media test. We were willing to go to take more risk with this game because it was so small, and because we thought the game mechanic is hooky enough, and we think it's going to do good enough in Japan. And then we had a lot of Japanese media reporting on it when we made the first demo. So we took that, we cheated a bit and took that as the social validation. Also, we didn't do a Kickstarter because the risk was small enough. For the other games, Wandering Village was quite successful on Twitter, or X, and it also did fairly good on TikTok. It really depends. For example, Niche absolutely didn't do anything on Reddit. It really depends where your target audience is, and I recommend when you start out, you just try out different channels and see what works best. Maybe ask some fellow developers that already have a bit of a following to share it for you, because otherwise you're kind of just shouting into the void. But if you can ask for some support to share it, you will quickly see which platform does the best results for you, and then you go from there. But it doesn't have to be socials. Games can also work in other ways. For the Wandering Village, because I only touched on it super quick, there really a lot of our effort, and also in general a lot of our effort recently has gone into Steam events. So especially the ones that are organized by other developers or other publishers, because they are actually customizing the page as they want it. If it's a Steam official thing, then it's just algorithm based, and then you get visibility if you're already big, but if you're small and new, then you're not being shown anywhere. So really look at publishers, developers that are making themed. So for example, the Cozy Fest is taking place end of the month. Try to reach out and try to apply and get into that. And then, that really has been a major contributor. And then YouTubers and streamers. We put a lot, I think the most effort that we put in any marketing is YouTubers and streamers. We've also built up our own Discord of YouTubers and streamers. over the past 9 years, or 5 years we started, where whenever we send a mail out to YouTubers and streamers, we also invite them to come to our Discord, and then they can grab the roles of all the games that interest them, and then wherever there is an update, we just ping them there. And we also sometimes do some paid stuff there, so new update for, I don't know, for the Wandering Village. First 50 people that react, we pay you $50 for your stream or video. Something like that, to really like keep them active in the Discord. And for many small ones, this is sometimes the first time they have a paid gig, and they're like super excited about it. And then you kind of form these long-term relationships with people that are then also growing their own community. And when we send out emails for launches, we usually send out like between 5,000 and 10,000 mails to YouTubers and streamers. I often hear like people saying, yeah, but I sent out 50 mails to YouTubers. Nobody played my game. Yes, you need to send out more. And so over the years, we have, like for every game release, we looked through YouTube and Twitch and collected all these mail addresses, and then started a process where, you can do it kind of automated, where you customize a part of the email to say why you're specifically sending it out to them with a Steam key and everything. And that has been working quite well for us, even if it's not paid coverage, also just organic. Yeah, it really depends on the game. But for us, YouTubers and streamers and Steam events and sometimes social media is what works best. And cross promotions with other developers, like making bundles and stuff. It's really cool.
Any additional questions?
Hi. First of all, thanks for the great talk.
Thanks.
It was really inspiring to listen to as like part of a group who wants to like start their own studio. One question I had is like you mentioned you started with a group of friends.
Yes.
But obviously at some point you realized you were probably going to need more hands to get the fullest potential out of a game, right? What was the biggest, I guess, obstacle, like figuring out, okay, who are we going to add? How do you still make it fair for everyone? Because you obviously want to, well, make everyone feel like they are part of this team, right? So yeah, what was the hardest obstacle to overcome with that?
I think firstly, not growing too fast. Even though you're sometimes in the position, like now, we could go and hire 5 people. But firstly, it really increases your risk. Every person that you add is adding so much more risk because of the long-term cost. And secondly, and then you have to stop yourself because there's so many talented people and you want to hire them all. But you're like, no, not this year, only 1 per year max. And then, as I said, mostly just people that we worked with before, like that we met and worked with for game jams, or for example, the girl that needed to port the Wandering Village to all the consoles and had never done it before, that was actually the apprentice of my co-founder. So he was like, I need a new programmer, but I want them to program in a way that I like. I taught her from the very beginning, so she programs exactly like me, so let's get her. So we often make decisions that we hire people that are very junior and kind of try to help them to get up to speed. Also because the Swiss games industry doesn't have that many veteran senior people that you can hire, so we're kind of used to bringing you on, throwing you in there, helping you to get up to speed. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, if I may. And related to that question, how do you keep on focusing on design while your studio grows?
You mean me?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a hard question. So me, I have basically removed myself from all roles. So I'm originally an artist that studied game design, but then kind of got into marketing. And then we just hired people that are better at art than me. And then we hired people that are better at game design than me, like the guy where we all needed to increase our salary. And now what is mostly for me to do is managing people and marketing, but also sometimes I'm like, no, I'm making a prototype. And since this studio is supposed to be a place where we enjoy making games. So that also counts for me. So I also try to find a mix of like work where I can provide for the studios, like my skills, but at the same time I want to have a fun week too. And then, yeah, sometimes it collides a little bit, and you need to make sure it doesn't collide too often. Or maybe then you need to take a step back and really say, hey, guys, I'm just prototyping now, also for a week. Don't bother me with stuff. So, yeah, it's a hard balance. The more people you have, but we also try to now, as a next step, since everybody wants to make smaller games and Dungeon Crawler has worked well, we decided that we're probably, not sure yet, gonna make Wandering Village DLC with like a 3 or 4 people team, and then the other people are probably gonna be 2 more teams, and then we're gonna have 2 projects, like 2 new games and 1 DLC, like running simultaneously, and then the groups are kind of supposed to manage themselves. So I'm only there for like when there is a major marketing beat or something. That's the plan. We're gonna see if it works.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I feel re-energized. It was very informative. I was curious about something. So I'm seeing 4 games with different genres. And I had a question about your teams and the departments. Like when you switch to a different type of game in a genre, like do the team, like the department leads also switch around?
Yeah, so far, aside from Dungeon Crawler, it was always all of us working on one game at the same time, and then Dungeon Crawler kind of broke off with a smaller group for the first time, and then we all switch, and we have to see that we all are liking the genre, so when we did the Wandering Village, all of us played like 20 city builders. So it was like, okay, it's now city builder week, and then everybody picked some games and we played them, and then we talked about what we liked in each of them. So you kind of have to get up to speed in this new genre that you're doing.
All right, any more?
Yes, hello, just a quick follow-up question. How do you get those 5,000 to 10,000 mails from YouTubers and streamers?
Yeah, you collect them. Yeah,
yes, you one by one for
that
everyone?
was a one-by-one thing. Nowadays, there is tools where you can, I mean, probably also back in the day, you can use tools to scrape them, right, off YouTube and Twitch. Most of it was hand-collected in long hours. And then also what you can do is, if you have developer friends, just exchange the list or do it together, because then you don't have to individually do it. So your developer friend made a similar game to you, or you reach out to an indie studio that made a similar game, like, can I have your YouTuber list? Sometimes they're like, yeah. I mean, if there are like emails in there that you got that you're not supposed to share, then you can't. But if it's all publicly available, then there's no reason why you shouldn't share. Did you find any decision point that I really didn't see? I'm curious. You're like, oh, you totally did that, and you're not aware that you did that. Because that needs to go in the updated version of this talk next year. No? Okay, good.
And we have a few more minutes if there's any last questions.
Hi, actually, I suddenly realized I had a small question about the, because was it the dungeon? Yeah, it was a dungeon crawler game, because you realized that game when you were in Japan, that it would be like a big hit there probably, because like, well, there's so many claw machines there. But since like it was a main of the reason to do it was because people in that country would be interested, did you guys ever consider like localizing the game, or was there ever like maybe there wasn't a need for it? Because I know localization can have a big impact on how many sales you have, or even wish lists.
So starting with the Wandering Village, we have always localized everything. So even the demo for Dungeon Crawler was in Japanese and Chinese, and I think German and English. And then when it's early access, now it has like 13 languages, which sucks. Like, it's so much nicer if you just have the game in one language and you're so much faster. And then you need to wait for the localization company to finish. I mean, localization is amazing, but I wish we would only do it for the 1.0 release, but it has become too important to localize from the very beginning, so now you cannot ignore that, even if it makes your development cycle a bit slower.
Okay, we have time for one more question, if there is one. Okay, I think we're good. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for a great talk.
Thank you.